and other duties as prescribed by the senior pastor.
The classic line you find on a job description.
Yeah, here's your job description and also anything else that we want to get you to do.
Yeah, so vague, and
super
broad.
vague.
Ministry settings like to be vague, not to be unhelpful,
No.
I think, but to go, we want to give you space to figure out what your strength
Yeah.
is, to step into that and to raise other people up who can support you in that. Well, welcome to Ministry, a BUV Generations podcast. You're joined by me. I'm Adam Southwood, engagement pastor at New Hope, joined
By Kimberly Smith. I am the Generations and Emerging Leaders Pastor at our Baptist Union Support Hub. It's good to be here.
So good, Kimmy. Week 2, we are back for another Welcome to Ministry podcast. It's been great to finally get to this point of our journey of wanting to put these podcasts together and have some conversations with you guys.
Yep,
it's so good
invite
to
you
be in conversation there.
Yeah, it's really good.
Last week we had a lot of initial conversation on our own roads into ministry and some of our own stories there. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please do. But as we're getting started into this week, I thought I'd bring up a very interesting topic for us to just chat about a bit through. Job descriptions.
Job descriptions.
So you're, getting started in ministry. You finally landed a role or something that you're really excited about, or you've had that conversation with your senior pastor and something's just got a bit started. As soon as we start formalizing things, a piece of paper lands in front of you that seeks to explain what you need to do as youth pastor or as kids coordinator, and you look through it. What's your first thought when you think about you looking at your first job description?
I think my favourite part of my first job description was the final line item after a few different, I said kids and youth, so there's quite a few different headings and subheadings there. Final thing, and other duties as prescribed by the senior pastor.
The classic line you find on a job description.
Yeah, here's your job description and also anything else that we want to get you to do.
Yeah, so vague, and
super
broad.
vague. That's exactly what it is. But I think we often talk about, the experience of ministry. There's so many things that can be like, that wasn't on the brochure, that wasn't in the fine print. Like, I didn't sign up for that. Like, so there can be a bit of disclarity around position descriptions. But the languaging, sometimes it's very hard to predict from a position description how helpful or useful that framework's going to be until you're maybe a little bit aware of the context in which you're serving. The classic one is a line item that says be responsible for the youth group. What does that mean?
What does that mean? It's so, and I think that as I reflect on some of my jobs in, a non-ministry setting compared to a ministry setting, is that ministry settings like to be vague, not to be unhelpful, I think, but to go, we want to give you space to figure out what your strength is, to step into that and to raise other people up who can support you in that. But that doesn't combat the fact that, like we were saying last time, it's that first Monday, you're in the office, I've got to figure out what it means to run a youth ministry. I know about the program element of it. I know that I've got to maybe do something on a Friday night. But what's the rest of it?
Yeah. And recognizing that each of those areas of responsibility come with a whole package of responsibilities. And the youth ministry, just to keep using that as an example, is a classic one of, if you're running the youth ministry, you're running the youth ministry team, which is a whole different thing than running a Friday night event. It's coordinating a group of, pastorally caring for a group of people. It is rostering them or scheduling things. It is dealing with all of the individual things that are happening in each of their lives to make sure that they're showing up at their best and that you're investing back in them, in their discipleship. And it's, the challenges of sort of pastoral care, mental health, all the things that you might manage in that. It's the disparity in skill and capacity and how do you upskill. And so there can be a lot involved. And as I'm saying that out loud, I don't say that to scare anybody, but maybe it actually is quite affirming to sort of say, oh, yeah, there's a lot going on. That's
There's a
okay.
lot
You know,
going
that
on.
it feels like a lot because it's a lot and it's great things and great opportunities, but often can be quite overwhelming.
Very. In the vagueness of some of your early job descriptions, as you began to figure out the components required for, you know, in inverted commas, like running a youth
Yeah.
ministry or a kids ministry, what were some of the things that took you by surprise in terms of, oh, I didn't realize that I would be responsible for that?
Yeah, I think, as you say, it was quite vague. So it probably didn't surprise me that I was responsible for anything because, as I said, it could be responsible for everything
Yeah.
by the way that the position description was written. But I think probably in the early stages of working in the kids and youth ministry space, I was not as equipped or mindful of the parents and families and the broader ministry to the unit that the
Cohort,
child
yeah.
belonged to. And also then, I mean, very quickly I stepped into it with the passion and the area of sort of focus and spirit gifting and passion that I have that around equipping the whole church to minister to the whole family. That took a lot of years to show up on my position description that was my job, you know, but also I think a natural bent for me, I'm leader oriented in terms of leadership development, and I'm probably much more a big picture person than a doer of tasks.
Yeah.
And that set me up in a way that meant I was recruiting other people immediately because I can't do kids ministry and youth ministry by myself all the time. Like,
Totally.
and so that necessitated a type of ministry, but also my natural bent came out in that. But again, I don't think my position description said I had to develop anybody.
Yes, yet my experience for the past few years has been that is probably one of the main things that I spend my time doing is developing others. And for a season before I was engagement pastor, I was in youth ministry for a while there, and I realized that youth might be the thing that's in the title,
Yeah.
but the more I was doing it, the less and less time I was spending with the youth themselves. I know that, like, initially that felt really, like, counterintuitive to me. I think there was even like almost an identity sense of like, I'm doing this
I'm the youth
wrong.
pastor. Yeah.
Like, I'm meant to be constantly hanging out with these young people, and I probably found myself spending more time, you know, trying to squeeze that in amongst the other stuff and working longer hours and, you know, setting up unhealthy practices in terms of trying to just do all the stuff and still trying to be a personal, like, you know, come alongside kind of discipler. Because that was my experience as a small group leader
Yeah.
for a number of years. Is
Yeah, right.
I'm coming alongside. I've got this group of young people who I care about deeply. I've been nurturing, you know, since they were in prep or something. I care about these guys, and to now suddenly step back from that and go, that's not a bad thing because I'm investing in the people, investing in them.
Yeah.
And that flow-on effect, it took me a while to actually grasp.
Be okay with that. Yeah. And start measuring and sort of reviewing yourself and your output and the fruit of your ministry in a different way, because it's not about the connection with that one teenager.
Yeah.
It's about empowering the leaders, and like there's a shift that takes place. And I think, you know, for those listening, we'll have like a really broad range of people in terms of the context that they're ministering in. For some, it's not even on the cards that they could step back from the doing of ministry because it's just them and maybe one other person who's trying to get this youth group up and going, or it's them and a few volunteers that are running a worship team, or, you know, that we're not at the step back point, but and a lot of, you know, listeners being in very different ministry contexts in terms of resourcing and stuff. But I think there's a review to do of like, what am I doing what am I meant to be doing? What do they think I'm doing? What do I, what do I see as needing to be done? As we said, in some ways, a vague position description is helpful to give you scope to say, we're going to go this way because that's where God's leading us and that's who we have and the resource that's available to us. But also I think sometimes the vagueness of a position description can cause a lot of uncertainty. Can cause a little bit of overwork because I'm being all things to all people because I don't have clarity around what I am meant to be doing or what and also we've working within a lot of different expectations people have of what roles will be.
That's massive.
I say youth pastor or I say kids pastor, I say worship leader. Everybody has a picture of what that is very different. And so the clarity around when I say youth pastor, this is what I'm thinking. When I say kids pastor, this is what I'm imagining. This is the type of role I'm perceiving. And again, some of that comes back to what your welcome to ministry was like, because I'm assuming an external hire. You've responded to an advertisement. There's a bit more clarity around this is who we're looking for and this is what we want. But that's not necessarily a given. But then some of our roles, like your experience a little bit, mine completely was we have you and we want to create a role around you and we're going to, it's not an empty role that you're filling. So we're defining this role as you go. And so there's a bit of variety in that as well.
Something that's really stuck out to me in kind of this space when it comes to job descriptions is that although they can be vague in different areas, it does very clearly set out what is expected of you. But then there will come a journey of what are the unofficial expectations. You're a 1 day a week youth pastor, and so you come along on a Friday to run youth and to catch up with leaders, or you're running play groups, and so Tuesday, Wednesday mornings is your shtick, and that's just the way it goes. And this might not come from an organizational perspective, but from a congregation and leadership team perspective is, but we expect you to be there for both services on a Sunday. Our expectation is that when we do our Christmas stuff, you're managing the kids' plays and that kind of a thing. And I think something that's really important for us to know in the vocational ministry space is that we've got to say the right yes. And so we can, everything in ministry can be a good thing, right? Everything we do.
Lots to do or to be done or that could happen.
For the glory of God and for the kingdom. And so we're super, super excited, but we have to manage our own capacities and expectations, because otherwise you're just going to get burnt out. And that's the last thing we want is a whole group of burnt out pastors, because what happens then? And so I think that as you're discovering these unwritten expectations and stuff going on within your context or your thing, push back on that, have a conversation with that, chat to your supervisor and go, I know it says this, I feel like this is actually the expectation. Where does this sit? How can we find something that's actually sustainable? Because having sustainability in a role in a ministry is going to be so much more fruitful than having a coming and going of people who are overworked and burnt out, and relationship breaks down.
But that's good. I like the encouragement to have the conversation and keeping that communication open, defining terms with one another, making expectations clear, and having a way to navigate together what we're measuring and what is good and so that you're not misaligning that sense of expectation versus output and then the disappointment that can come from either side in that. My hot tip around this area is the thing I'm deeply convicted about is that we as pastors are employed to get things done, not to do things.
Yes.
So I feel like, you read in scripture that the releasing of these pastoral leaders was, for the equipping of the saints, this gifting and this calling, everyone is gifted first we are gifted and then we are a gift to our church environment. And I think this pastoral space where we put some money behind it, where we say, no, I don't want you to work in the school anymore. We're going to pay your bills, so you can come over here and work for us some more. That we don't want that to turn into a professionalizing of ministry that everybody should be doing.
Yes,
and
yes.
that it classic for you shouldn't be sitting cutting out things and doing tasks that lots of other people in your congregation could do on church dollar, because the time that we're trying to release for you is so that you'll lead us, that you'll give oversight, that you'll make sure that youth group happens, that you'll make sure that kids ministry runs, that you'll whatever other ministry space, your community engagement or prayer or wherever it is that you're leading. But we're not asking you to do all of this ministry. We just want you to get it done and help us get it done. Now, there's two parts to that.
Yes.
Because that's your leadership has to be on board with that because often that's an expectation thing. Is like, why isn't Kim out there, doing
Stacking
whatever,
chairs.
or why is it, why is she in church on a Sunday morning and not out in the kids ministry, So we need good clarification for leaders around that. And then also I think it's a bit of a self-management thing as the pastor or the paid person, because the temptation is there. Often our passion is for the doing. We want to be hands-on.
Especially if that's your part of your welcome to ministry story.
Yeah.
Is I'm
I was
good
a
at the
doer.
doing. Yeah.
But so some of that is going to be a stretch to upskill ourselves into that leadership, oversight, releasing, delegating. I mean, delegating is an actual skill set. It's not as easy as it sounds, but that we would get better at doing that our intentionality would be that we would be able to release more and more to other people. And not just because we don't want to do it ourselves or, we're getting busy and we don't want to be overwhelmed, but actually it's good for them. Having a deep conviction that every person in this church is gifted to this church so that our church could reach, be on kingdom work with God in our community. So what is it that they bring? How do I draw it out of them? How do I give them opportunities? So that it's not just we need people on the roster.
Totally. It's not I've now got this role and title, therefore I can tell you to do all the jobs that I don't want to do. Because the truth is, you might actually want to do some of the things because you enjoy doing some of the things.
Yeah.
I think it's Andy Stanley that says, "Do what only you can do."
Yeah.
So there's going to be part of your ministry role that you've got some key volunteers around you who can do a lot of that stuff. And if you trust them, if you've raised them up, then great, release some of that. But there's going to be some aspects that only you can do. Part of that will be gifting, and part of that will be a part of the the office. It probably makes sense that you're the one having this difficult conversation or whatever it might be.
Yeah. You're the one managing a budget or doing reporting or being the liaising with leadership and staff
That was a really great lens for me in my early years to go, oh, am I doing this just because I used to do it and it was the kind of thing that I like, and or because I've got the attitude, man, I can do it 2 times faster and 4 times better in my head, probably not. So therefore I just should do it. It's just going to be easier and better that way. But, imagine if I actually spent that time investing in other people. And, it's that volunteer recruitment development thing that's on all of our job descriptions probably, where you get some real bang for buck in those early days if you spend some time investing in people, coming alongside others. And we're going to see a dip in maybe quality or execution to your own standards. We never put safety or compliance out of the way. There's
of course
parts where we step in, but 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the track, when we have journeyed with someone, when we have developed someone, and they're now doing that for someone else, the fruit of that is unreal.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, and that's the goal. Again, that's fruit for everybody. That's the person stepping into their gifting. It's the ministry benefiting. It's the other person they're investing in benefiting. Yeah, there's a lot of if our focus is on that way of measuring outcome.
Yeah.
It shifts how we do our role. Like because it's not just about how many people were at youth group, it becomes how many leaders did I invest in to facilitate youth group, or did that person take a next step in their leadership at youth group? You know, that there has to be some questioning. Again, lots of conversations happening around that with your upline
Totally.
to make sure that
that healthy conversation space is so important. And it can, it might feel uncomfortable initially when, you've been thrown into this role. This might be someone who you've known for a while, you've looked up to for a while, and you're like, how do I navigate these conversations? They've had to navigate the same conversations. If they've been, in ministry for a bit as well, like, these are conversations that we should all be having in all aspects. Our senior pastors are having these conversations with their church councils or eldership or diaconate or whatever it might be in your context there.
Yeah.
We've been talking about job descriptions as how we kind of got going on this. Something that comes along with a job description is the title that the church has chosen to give you. There can be lots of different experiences when it comes to navigating what your title is going to be. I recognize that sometimes there's tensions or things held in titles because some people are given this title initially, some people are given that title initially. Different churches treat things differently. What has your experience has been with your titles?
That's good. I started as a coordinator.
Yeah.
And with some extra study and some extra hours and extra experience, became pastor. But there are a lot of churches, there's a lot of nuance to this in churches in terms of what their hierarchical structure is, what their requirements are on what you need to do in order to be called pastor. Some churches have that constitutionally embedded, in their practices of a pastor is this, this, and this. Is a pastor appointed internally, by the senior pastor? I can appoint you, or does it have to go to the board or the membership, depending on the congregation and denomination and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that role title matters in, again, that communication of understanding what we think you do and how it is that we're going to treat you or expect you to behave, in our system because of that. But then I do think there's other barriers, whether it's gender or age or just practice. This is how we've always done it, that can put barriers in place where there's probably people listening who are feeling like fully fledged pastors in terms of the responsibility they have. They're asked to give spiritual oversight to lots of people, leaders and those in the ministry, that they're maybe even asked to preach or communicate, give gospel message, do devotion, whatever it is. Like they feel like they're doing the role of pastor, but somewhere in their system they're called director or key leader, and I think there's an encouragement there to not allow the title to be so significant, but then there is also some value in understanding what the expectations are that align themselves with that title and what, like, I've had, as you know, I meet with a lot of pastors and key leaders in my role, and there are some people for whom the way that they are described becomes either limiting or even devaluing in terms of their experience.
Tell
me
more about that.
That as I say, I feel like I function like a pastor, but I'm called a director, and in sometimes it's just a coordinator. I'm just a key leader. I'm just team leader, or it becomes a diminishing sort of language that's attached to that, because pastor is like the real deal, and you're just ... that. And I think various people will have had those awkward conversations, or probably maybe need to have those awkward conversations of aligning their expectations and the language that goes with it, because that it does matter if the communication around it is misaligned. Not, I mean, who cares really what you call me, because I'm doing what I'm doing regardless of what my name is or my title is. But then there are places and spaces where the title matters because of the authority that it carries in a certain environment, or because of the recognition of a shift that you were doing coordinating. Now we've got you in this pastoral oversight thing. We want to give you more spiritual and authority sort of responsibility.
I think it goes back to those healthy conversations, right? Of especially if you're stepping into vocational ministry in a community that you potentially haven't been a part of for a while. You don't know the history and the weighting that some roles and titles carry, and there could be a bunch of like tradition, expectation that held with some things, and sometimes it might be done that we're gonna potentially not give you this title initially as a cushioning, and so that the expectation isn't like unjustly put on you initially as well.
It's a protection of you that we don't want to elevate you too fast to a too high, like too weighty a responsibility.
But it only really works as a protection if they're aware of it.
Yes. Otherwise it feels like a demotion.
Totally. If you've been convinced that you're doing a pastoral role, but that's not what it says, and that can be really confusing. And I think like your role, especially in a ministry context, will develop as you develop, will grow as you grow. I think it's a very healthy exercise to make sure that role description and title probably caught up in that, and pay as well. Let's face it. Develop
it's dynamic
along with you. It's dynamic. A really great practice that I came across a few years ago was, having a look at your current job description, and then writing down what your actual job description is, like what you actually spend time doing. That can be a really great conversation tool for those supervisor conversations to go, hey, like I'm actually spending like a bit more time doing this. It's not in my description. Either we need to add it in and honor it and acknowledge it. Yeah. Or, why are you doing that? Like, do we need to...
Maybe I'm doing the wrong thing.
Totally. Do we need to reach some of our expectations so that we can be as aligned with the church's mission as possible, or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
The fun thing to kind of keep doing in this process is to then go, okay, well, let me write down my dream job description.
Yeah, right.
And I had experience recently of kind of doing that, was sensing that my time in youth ministry was maybe coming to an end. I'd be keen to do something else. Didn't necessarily have timelines in my head, but started jotting down some of my dream things, some of where I think my giftings lie, where I would like to be developed, that kind of a space. We had some leadership changes at church. One of our incredible pastors went on to be senior pastor in another church. Massive shout out there.
Sad.
So good. Sad, but like incredible, right, for the family.
For the kingdom.
And it unlocked some stuff, and it meant that I could have some conversations and go, I've actually been processing and thinking about this and gone, these are some of the things I'd like to do. Yeah. And I got to be involved in that healthy conversation of sculpting and shaping my new role. And that's been really, really exciting, really empowering.
Yeah, it's good. And it must be said, you're in an environment where that's a bit more possible. You've got a larger staff, larger church environment. So for some listening, it's not even on the radar to be that creative. But I think there is, to a sense of allowing God to keep refining in you, as you said, what only you can do. What are my key areas of gifting and passion and energy that I get from specific skills or specific types of ministry or parts of ministry, and being mindful of that so that you're leaning into those strengths as you go, regardless of what your position description says and how you get to do it. I think the other one is hearing people talk about that mindset of doing yourself out of a job, that some of that releasing can take place. Again, I think to be practical, you can only do yourself out of a job if either you don't need a job.
Yes.
That big inheritance came through and you can just retire at 23. Or there's another job in the organization for you to go to, you know, that as you bring people up underneath you, that kind of releases you out into some other space. But I think the better attitude is I want to raise people up to do the job I do, whether it's here or somewhere else. Not my job, but to do the job I do. You know, that so I want to allow you to get to the full potential of your leadership capacity or your, you know, development. And that may mean, because I still want my job, because I still have a mortgage, I might need to release you somewhere else. Like that, the best gift I can give you, the best investment I can make in you is to actually set you up somewhere else where there's an opportunity for you to take next steps in leadership, and being mindful of that in your own leadership as you're navigating your own position description, that you're thinking about how am I, as I'm delegating, as I'm identifying and calling out gifting and capacity in other people, what am I setting them up for? And do they have every opportunity to give that a go?
So good. It has been so good to chat with you today. I think we're going to wrap it up there, but keen to chat to you all again another week as we keep asking the question of how do we take these steps as we're welcomed into ministry?